What's going on everybody? Welcome to today's video of free-to-play Zibai Showcase. And since they've introduced DPS Check in Wonderland, I'm going to make full use of it and show you exactly how strong a free-to-play Zibai is in different teams, just like what you see here. So without further ado, let's begin! Alright, so here's my free-to-play build for C0 Zibai using the 4-star Natlan craftable sword, the R5 Flute of Expital. By the way, you can actually get this weapon for free from a Natlan puzzle called Furnace of Fury Embers, so make sure to clear that and save yourself a billion. Now on the other hand, the 3-star R5 Harbinger of Dawn is technically even stronger than the R5 craftable and comes very close to her signature weapon. But since it's really easy to overbuild Crit Red, especially with Illuga's buff, and you also have to keep your HP above 90%, this weapon basically only works with shielders like Zhongli and Ineffa, which I'll show you in DPS Check later. And as for the rest of the teams, I'll stick with the R5 craftable just to keep things consistent. Anyway, as for the artifact, no argument here, the Knight of the Sky set, with defense, crit damage as main stats. By the way, based on my calculations, the Elemental Mastery substat actually scales about the same as crit damage, so it's totally fine to run artifacts with tons of EM substats, as you can see from my same piece here. Now talent wise, she scales entirely off her elemental skill, so that's the one you should clone. On the other hand, her burst is really solid to upgrade as well. But unfortunately, I'm totally broke, so I'm leaving at level 9 for now. By the way, since Illuga is her dedicated 4-star support, I might as well show you my build. C0 level 70 Illuga using R5 Key Tank called Spear, and 2+2 full EM build to maximize his buff. And once again, I ran out of both Mora and ESP book, so I have no choice but to leave his burst at level 8, but luckily that's not really a big deal. Lastly, I'm not running Silker Moon Serenade set, because it actually doesn't work without his C2, so please keep this in your mind when building him. And that concludes everything for my build, so let's move on to her gameplay. Alright, so in terms of her gameplay and mechanics, she's actually really simple to play. All you have to do is to pair her with any high dose of DPS and keep spamming her normal attack during her elemental skill. And once this meter on the left reaches over 70%, press E to drop a nuke, which deals heavy lunar crystallized damage, up to 4 times per rotation. And that's basically all. Just remember it's best not to dodge when you're spamming attacks, since the last hit of a combo can trigger an extra lunar crystallized damage, which is pretty significant especially at C0. By the way, as for her burst, you can pretty much use it at any point you want, ideally right after her skill nuke, so she can gain charges during the animation. This feels familiar, right? Yes, at the end of the day, she's basically a dual Kinich, but way better because Lunar Crystallize actually hits hard, unlike Burning which hits us hard instead of enemy. Alright, so when it comes to her team building, first thing first, just like every Nokrai DPS, you need a Nokrai teammate for Full Moon Sign. And luckily Zibai has a 4-star dedicated Nokrai support, Illuga, so this part is already settled for basically free. Now since Lunar Crystallize needs Hydro, you have to bring at least one Hydro star DPS, most preferably Columbina for obvious reason, which I'm pretty sure all of you have. No one actually skipped her for Zibai, right? Well, in any case, even though Columbina is the best choice, Zibai still works perfectly fine without her. As long as there's a Hydro sub DPS on the team, Zibai is good to go. And with that, the core of her team is basically done, and the last slot is totally feasible depending on your need, as you can run someone like Ineffa for Lunar Charge, Marika or Dueling for Reprise, or simply bring another Jaw or Hydro unit to make it a full Lunar Crystallized team, which has a slight advantage over the others thanks to Zibai's passive talent. Oh, by the way, if you're running Harbinger of Dawn, remember to bring Zhongli or Ineffa instead of Illuga, which solves both the requirements at once. Yeah, I know it sounds bad to draw her dedicated support, but trust me, it's way better than it looks, and you'll see why in a moment. Alright, so ever since the DPS checks were added in Wonderland, things are way more transparent now as we can see exactly how strong a team really is, making it much easier to judge whether a character is worth pulling or not. So just before showing you Zibai's DPS, here's my quick DPS reference for all the current meta teams, so you have a good idea of how strong she is just by looking at her DPS later. That said, keep in mind this is just my personal testing with my own build, and my skills are pretty average, so these are not the absolute damage ceiling at all. For instance, my C2 Awa Maruka could hit much harder if she managed to melt all the attacks, but I just can't consistently pull that off myself. So yeah, at the end of the day, these are all just for your reference to evaluate Zibai, so please don't take it too hard. And finally, let's see what a free-to-play Zibai can do, starting with her most common team, C0 Colombina, C0 Illuga, and C6 Golo. So in terms of damage, it's about 10% stronger than Ineffa, which to be honest, I'm slightly disappointed with it, because Zibai has to actively attack enemies, while Ineffa just works automatically on the background, with way better AoE and range. Not to mention, Ineffa has a shield, whereas Zibai has neither healer nor shielder with this team, which really sucks. Fortunately, she scales off defense, so even with just Colombina's prototype and C4 Golo's healing, she can at least survive in most situations. Oh, by the way, speaking of survivability, you can actually abandon it even more and slap a 4-star instructor set on Golo for more buffs. However, since he's the only non-Nokai unit in the team, using instructor also means less defense he has, meaning less buff you gain from their passive bonus. So in the end, you actually lose more than you gain with instructor. Alright, so the next one up is with Zhongli instead of Illuga. And yeah, it's truly a surprise, right? So it turns out Zhongli plus Harbinger of Dawn actually does about the same damage as with C0 Illuga, except you're totally invincible, can't be interrupted during normal attacks, and it's way better against high resistant enemies, which are very common nowadays. So yeah, unless you're pushing hardcore contents like Stygian or Slot where every bit of damage matters, you should always bring Zhongli instead of Illuga. That said, keep in mind my Illuga is only C0, which is relatively weak, so if yours is C4 and above, and especially C6, which is pretty unlikely for a C0 Zibai, Illuga is going to be way stronger than Zhongli. Now as for the other Zhou teammates, even though not many people pull her, I still have to mention Chiori, since she's probably the one who benefits the most from Lunar Crystallize. Just for your information, the totals from Lunar Crystallize are actually considered Zhou construct, meaning Chiori can always summon 2 doors even without her C1, which makes her a really good Zhou sub DPS. And as you can see from my testing here, she clearly outperforms C6 Golo, and most likely Illuga as well, especially without C6. Finally, after 2 years, C0 Chiori has found her value. And lastly, if you miss Colombina for any reason, or she's busy in another Nokai team, here's the most budget-friendly team for Zibai, all thanks to the fact you can choose Xingqiu for the event as reward. And to be honest, this is actually a really decent team, dealing around 80,000 DPS with only one 5-star, which is better than majority of the DPS in this game. So yeah, I would say she's one of the most free-to-play friendly main DPS. Alright, now that we've done with pure Lunar Crystallized teams, let's check out some other elements. Starting with the most common suggestion I have seen, running Zibai with Ineffa for her Lunar Charge. And this honestly surprised me, because not only both Lunar relations work really well with each other, but also is actually a bit stronger than all the previous teams, which is unbelievable. Besides, you have a shield, which is pretty much invulnerable as well, thanks to Zibai's scaling of defense, so you can actually use the stronger Harbinger of Dawn without any trouble. And not to mention, with so many bosses being weak to Lunar Charge, this team absolutely has its place and value in meta. By the way, since Zibai's team has now moved away from pure draw damage to miss damage, Illuga becomes basically useless here, as he only buffs draw. So that's why I tested with Synonym instead. And wow! 150,000 damage per second. This is almost as strong as my premium Lunar Bloom team, which costs 7 5-stars. In fact, I would say this team is actually better overall, as it's far easier and more comfortable to play, thanks to having both healing and shielding. So honestly, if you don't have C6 Illuga, this is probably the strongest team you can go for. That said, she's basically competing with Flames, who arguably fits Ineffa much better for obvious reason. And since I don't have him, I'm not entirely sure who's better, so you'll have to check out other videos for that. But nevertheless, this is top meta team. So finally, as conclusion, I would say Zibai is definitely one of the best free-to-play friendly DPS, not just because her free-to-play weapon Harbinger of Dawn is nearly as strong as her signature weapon, but also all of her teammates are conveniently on the same banner as her, saving you lots of pulls for the dedicated support. On top of that, she's probably the best Nokai DPS that doesn't rely on Colombina, meaning if you have already pulled things on Ineffa, who can comfortably kick Columbina on their team, as you can see from this footage. And finally, as for the meta, well, I would say she's the strongest not-quite DPS, especially when you have Ineffa and Columbina. But if you already have Flings, then it's better to just go for his signature or constellations instead of spending your pulls on a C0 R0 Zibai. Lastly, there are rumors about a future support map specifically for Zibai, but honestly, I'm not willing to bet on it. After what happened with Navia and Chiori, I really don't want to go through that again, so I suggest you don't get your hopes up either. Anyway, that's about everything for this video, so if this is helpful for you, please leave a like and subscribe, and drop a comment down below what you think about Zibai. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.